The sky was a haze of sulphurous clouds when Jace Renn, a mere technician by trade, awoke to the jarring screams of twisting metal. His mind reeled, battered by the abrupt realization that his transport ship, the venturing star, had not merely landed, but crashed upon this hostile, noxious planet. Oxygen, or a semblance thereof, rushed in hot waves through the fractured hull. Sharp pain ran across his temples, yet he forced himself upright, blinking away the sting of acrid smoke. Pieces of the corridor cladding dangled overhead, threatening to collapse at the slightest touch, and the floor beneath him was slick with fluids from the damaged fuel lines. The scent was bitter, tinged with a chemical reek that turned his stomach. "Anyone alive?" he shouted into the dim corridor. Only the echoes of distant sparking conduits answered. With a trembling hand, he reached for his emergency respirator and coughed as the stale, chemical-laden air assailed his lungs. The device hissed a brief protest, then provided him with a thin stream of purified oxygen, just enough to stave off immediate suffocation. He was no soldier, no brave explorer with stirring tales of adventure. He was a technician, a man who understood circuit boards and electromagnetic calibrations, not the savage intricacies of alien wildlife or the horrors of a toxic world. A single, gnawing question consumed him. How was he still alive? Looking around, he saw the carnage that indicated the fate of his crewmates, the battered bodies of pilot and guard, whose names he had known only in passing, lay sprawled in macabre angles, pinned beneath fallen beams. Somewhere in the gloom, an alarm beeped in a delirious pattern, undone by the devastating crash. Jace forced himself to look away, though guilt welled in his chest. They were beyond saving, and his own survival depended on practical focus. He navigated the wreckage, pushing aside shattered panels and equipment. If the ship's external sensors were still functional, perhaps he could glean the data he needed to figure out how long the atmosphere would remain breathable, or rather, how long the compromised oxygen reserves could sustain him. Each step sent shards of debris clattering. In the distance, he heard a scraping noise, something reminiscent of metal being dragged across the hull from the outside. He paused, breath caught in his throat. But then, nothing more came. Silence reigned once again, heavy with tension. Anxiety simmered within him, urging him to hurry. He tried the door to the main corridor, which had been bent off its tracks, but it refused to move more than a few centimeters. With a grunt, he squeezed through the gap, scraping his shoulder on a jagged edge. On the other side, the corridor lights flickered like dying fireflies. A haze of dust particles swirled in the stale air, creating illusory shapes that played on Jace's fears. The path to the control center was heavily obstructed, but the technician's instincts guided him to an access panel. Perhaps if he could reroute power, open the sealed bulkheads, and re-establish rudimentary life support, he might buy enough time to call for help. He rummaged for tools scattered near a fallen crate, collecting what he could. Yet his mind reeled with the knowledge that a distress beacon on this planet, so deep in the uncharted frontier, might never be found. No, he told himself, do not surrender to despair. As long as there was breath in his lungs, there was a chance to carry on. With trembling fingers, he pried open a panel and began reattaching wires, bridging damaged relays, coaxing some semblance of power into the system. Tiny sparks illuminated his sweat-soaked face, reflecting the swirl of determination and fear in his eyes. Outside, thunder rolled in bizarre, muted vibrations, as though the very atmosphere itself was thick with toxins that smothered sound. He tapped the final circuit and, with a hiss, some measure of emergency lighting returned to the corridor. The overhead illumination revealed a hallway slick with chemical residue, The walls blackened from smaller electrical fires. Vents hissed, struggling to purge the contaminated air. The old ship was dying, but not yet dead. For a moment, Jace felt relief. Then a sudden thud reverberated through the hull. He froze. Thump, thump, thump. Another reverberation, traveling like a pulse beneath his feet. Something large, perhaps, or several smaller creatures, were moving outside the ship. He remembered the scraping sound he had heard earlier. The planet was indeed inhabited by what? He dared not guess. Focus, he muttered, but found his throat tight. The next panel indicated the hull's oxygen capacity was dangerously low, mixed with toxins that would eventually corrode the respirator's filter. If he stayed inside the wreck for too long, he would die. If he ventured outside, he risked discovering what lay beyond those torn hull plates. Better to die trying, he whispered, though fear churned within him like a living beast. Grabbing an environmental pack from the emergency cache, he readied a crude sensor suite that would help him gauge the outside air composition. The reading was far from promising, but it was not instantly lethal. The planet's atmosphere was thick with sulfuric compounds. With the pack's additional filtration systems, he might survive a few days at most. That would have to be enough. He forced open the battered external hatch. Poisonous wind howled into the corridor as soon as it recognized an opening, spattering Jace's face shield with droplets of stinging chemicals. The sky beyond was a swirling miasma of sickly green and orange, broken only by a luminous ring around a dim sun. Vast, twisted trees with trunk-like structures soared in the distance, their canopies shimmering like slick webs in the foul air. The ground was damp, black with tar-like soil, dotted by luminescent patches that glowed faintly. Jace took a hesitant step forward, mindful of each breath. The ground squelched beneath him. What a place to die, he muttered grimly, glancing back at the ruined hulk that had been his craft. He had scarcely moved another 2 steps when he felt a presence. A strange hush settled around him, as though even the alien wind was holding its breath. There it was, a silhouette, a lithe shape crouched atop a piece of the battered hull. Jace squinted, heart pounding in his chest. Was it a predator? It appeared vaguely humanoid, though with elongated limbs and a startling tail that flicked behind it. Yellow eyes glinted in the dim light, tracking him with almost predatory focus. Adrenaline surged through his veins, compelling him to flee or fight. But Jace was unarmed, save for a small cutting torch in his tool belt. The figure growled softly, a rumble that traveled the air like an unspoken threat. Jace lifted his hands, hoping to appear non-threatening. I don't want trouble, he said, though his voice trembled. The words tumbled awkwardly from his dry throat, and for a moment, he wondered if this being could understand him. The figure regarded him with a curious tilt of the head, then leapt off the twisted hull with surprising agility. Gliding through the gloom, it landed before him, crouched low. Jace could now see that it was, indeed, female in shape, clothing, or rags resembling clothing, clung to her muscular form. There was a distinct bestial note to her features, faint stripes along her arms, pointed, fur-covered ears, sharpened nails, a savage, mesmerizing fusion of woman and beast. He swallowed hard. "Can you speak?" he asked, feeling quite the fool for addressing what was clearly a genetically altered creature, or some native being of advanced evolution. She stared at him, blinking slowly, her tail swishing in agitation. Then, a voice, raspy and accented, emerged from her lips. "You, intruder." She did not appear to have full command of language, or else she was testing the words. Jace tried to keep calm. "My ship crashed. I'm stranded. he said softly, motioning to the wreck behind him. I'm not here to harm you. A faint growl resonated from her throat. She prowled closer, arms tense, ready to pounce. Jace backed away, step by step, but she matched his pace, snarling, abruptly. Her nostrils flared, and she tilted her head, regarding him as though he were the strangest creature in this alien land. Then she spoke again, more certain this time. Smell no fear, but your heart is fast. His breath hitched. She could sense his fear, or his excitement, or both. Despite his caution, he could not help but marvel at her. Humanity's expansion into the galaxy had brought them into contact with many species, but she seemed like some lost experiment, a mixture of human and beast that defied classification. A deeper ache within him warned him that his respirator could fail if he did not re-enter the ship soon, but to retreat would leave him at her mercy, or the planet's. I need shelter, he said, forcing a calmer tone. I can't breathe this air for long. My ship might protect both of us. In response, she bared her teeth, whether in threat or an attempt at a smile. Jace could not be sure. You belong to me, she announced in a low, confident growl, as though it were the most natural statement in the universe. Then, with disconcerting speed, she seized his arm, claws grazing his skin but not drawing blood. Her strength was remarkable. Jace had no choice but to follow her lead. They stumbled back into the ship, the Beastwoman guiding Jace as though impatient at his slower pace. Sparks rained from overhead conduits, and somewhere in the distance, metal groaned under the weight of the planet's relentless atmospheric pressure. Jace's heart pounded, wary of the creature who claimed he now belonged to her, yet strangely relieved that she had not slain him outright. Once they reached a portion of the corridor with less rubble, she released his arm and sniffed the air again, wrinkling her nose in distaste. Stinks, she said, and coughed. It's not safe here, Jace agreed, carefully removing his respirator to check the filter. Toxic fumes, she hissed, stepping back warily at the hiss of his gear. He realized she had probably never seen such equipment, or at least not in functional condition. Gently, he raised a hand, showing he meant no harm. I'm Jace, he said slowly, pointing to himself. Jace. Her ears flicked, tail swishing. Kaera, she replied after a moment, tapping her own chest. The name struck him as oddly familiar, but he could not place it. Perhaps it was reminiscent of old Earth dialects, or maybe he had simply read it somewhere. Regardless, the introduction was a step toward communication. Kaera, he repeated, earning a slight nod. He glanced around the battered corridor, pondering the possibility of sealing off a portion of the ship that could still maintain oxygen integrity. Many compartments were compromised, but the engineering bay might be reinforced enough to keep a stable environment. We need to move to the rear compartments, he explained, pointing that way. Safer. Her gaze was sharp, scanning the environment with an animalistic intensity. She nodded once, apparently understanding the gist of his statement. Together, they picked their way through the debris, Jace occasionally pausing to hack away at twisted panels or collapsed beams with his cutting torch. Kaera watched him work with an intense curiosity, her bright eyes following every flick of the torch's flame. She would occasionally press her shoulder to his arm, as though to steady him or to stake some claim. Belong to me, she repeated at one juncture, placing her hand upon his chest with unexpected tenderness. The sharp claws only lightly indenting his jumpsuit. He tensed, uncertain. We can talk about that after we survive, he murmured, though he doubted she grasped his meaning fully. At last, they reached the engineering bay. The heavy blast door was partially crumpled, but Jace managed to pry it open enough to slip inside. He engaged the locking mechanism from within, hoping the door would hold. The room was not as damaged as the rest, though sparks flew from overhead lights, and consoles flickered with half-broken readouts. A scattering of tools lay everywhere, some afloat in puddles of coolant. "Let me see if I can restore partial life support here," Jace said, mostly to himself. He hurried to the main console, his hands trembling slightly as he tapped away at the battered controls. Kaera roamed the room in prowling circles, her tail flicking as she observed every corner. In a far corner, old crates were stacked haphazardly, some of them containing rations, possibly enough for a short time. The console spat out error messages in red. With a grimace, Jace set about patching the system manually. He isolated the environment regulators, rerouted power from the nearly depleted secondary battery, and prayed it would be enough to scrub the air and keep this section relatively free of toxins. After several tense minutes, the ventilation fans roared to life. The overhead lights flickered, and a status bar crept upward on the screen. "Please, please work," he whispered. Kaera's ears perked at the noise, and she glanced at him with a quizzical expression. Another minute ticked by, the fans cycling. Jace checked his handheld sensor, letting out a sigh of relief when it showed decreasing toxicity levels in the bay. "We'll live," he told her, removing his respirator slowly. Kaera came closer, sniffing curiously. She took a few experimental breaths and coughed, but eventually her breathing steadied. A moment passed in strange, fragile peace. Jace realized, not for the first time, that she was an imposing figure, tall, with corded muscles, though her face, when not snarling, bore an oddly delicate cast. Her attire was nothing more than tattered scraps that might have once been some sort of uniform. "Why are you like this?" he asked softly, uncertain if she even grasped the question. "How did you get here?" She studied him, eyes flickering with recollection, then pointed to one of the battered consoles. "Project Feral," she said in a halting voice. Each syllable weighed with something akin to sorrow and anger. Then she growled low in her throat, baring her teeth in frustration, as though language itself was failing to express the magnitude of her experiences. Project Feral. The name sparked a memory in Jace's mind. An old rumor about a clandestine military endeavor. Genetic experimentation to create super soldiers or specialized infiltration units. Abandoned decades ago, if the rumors were to be believed. Had Kaera been one of the test subjects, marooned on this forsaken planet after the project was scrapped? It chilled him to think of it. Gently, he placed a hand on her shoulder, ignoring his own trepidation at the feel of taut muscle beneath furred skin. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "We're both stranded here now, but we'll find a way to leave." Kaera's gaze softened, at least marginally, and she tilted her head in a way that might have been acceptance or gratitude. Then she rummaged through the crates, sniffing for anything edible. Jace joined her, relieved to find that some of the sealed rations were intact. They might taste like cardboard, but in a crisis, anything was sustenance. They ate in companionable silence, the fans humming overhead. Outside, faint echoes of thunder or distant mechanical noises reminded them of the planet's treacherous nature. The quiet moment was broken by a sudden beep from a console. Jace rushed over, seeing that the ship's battered sensors had detected movement near the crash site perimeter. "Something is out there," he murmured, scanning the readout. Heavy tracks, metallic composition, a machine or vehicle of some sort. Kaera appeared at his side, her eyes narrowing at the flickering sensor screen. "Hunters," she said, a note of venom in her voice. Jace frowned, adjusting the scanner's frequency. "Hunters. You mean there are people here, or drones, or..." But Kaera only growled in frustration, scanning for words. Drones, but, with men's minds behind them, they come to kill, to erase. Jace felt a chill run down his spine. If the clandestine Project Feral was truly behind Kaera's existence, it was possible that factions within the galaxy still sought to bury the evidence of that project. Now that the venturing star had crashed here, those forces might have been alerted. He swallowed thickly. They can't leave any witnesses, he whispered. Which means we're both targets. Kaera's claws flexed. Then we fight, she declared simply, as though there was no other option. Jace exhaled slowly, fear mixing with a sudden surge of determination. He might be a mere technician, but the impulse to survive and to protect this strange, ferocious woman who had rescued him burned fiercely in his chest. Yes, he said, nodding. We fight. Night descended upon the planet like a living veil. The toxic atmosphere, thick and burdened by bizarre chemical compositions, glowed in ephemeral streaks across the sky, an aurora of swirling yellows and greens. Through the engineering bay's fractured observation panels, Jace and Kaera watched for signs of the intruders, minds weighed with unease. You said they come to erase, Jace said softly, kneeling beside a console that displayed grainy sensor data. Are they part of the original project that created you? Kaera crouched near him, her tail curled around her feet. She nodded slowly. Long ago, they left me here. Now they find me again. Or find you. Or both. Jace's mind churned with horrifying possibilities. Perhaps his mere presence had triggered some signal. Or maybe it was the crash's distress beacon. In any case, the hunters would not be merciful. We need a plan, he said. We can't just hide. They'll tear the ship apart if they really want us. Kaera lifted her gaze, scanning the rafters as if searching for hidden watchers. We can lead them away, she offered. Woods, jungle, dangerous. Drones cannot pass easily. He pictured the dense flora, those towering, twisted trees with labyrinthine roots that jutted through the tar like soil. The environment might hamper the drone's progress, but it could also spell doom for two fugitives without proper equipment. Still, staying in the crash site felt like waiting for the inevitable. We might salvage supplies, he mused, then head out. Find some natural shelter. We can circle back only if we need to scavenge. Kaera nodded in agreement. Better than dying in steel coffin, she said bluntly, gesturing to the battered surroundings, deciding to rest before making the move. They took turns sleeping and standing watch by the observation panel. Jace drifted in a haze of broken dreams, haunted by images of monstrous drones, scorching lasers, and the unnatural eyes of Kaera flashing in the darkness. She, too, seemed ill at ease, but her stamina was remarkable, and she often paced the corridors with restless energy. When morning came, a pale imitation of dawn filtered through the planet's swirling clouds. They set about preparing for departure. Jace scoured every corner of the engineering bay, salvaging anything that might prove useful: tools, ration packs, leftover filtration cartridges for his respirator, scraps of wiring, anything that could be converted into traps or basic defenses. Kaera, for her part, guided him to the remains of a small weapons locker she had discovered near the cargo hold. Most of the rifles were warped beyond repair, but Jace managed to piece together a functioning sidearm from spare parts, though it only had a handful of energy cells. Not my style, Kaera grunted, testing her claws by slashing at a piece of bent metal. But you use, Jace chuckled, somewhat nervously, at her demonstration. Yes, I'll use it, though I doubt I'd be much of a shot, he admitted. I'm a technician, not a soldier. Kaera simply inclined her head in acknowledgement. You will learn. They mustered what courage they had and pried open one of the side hatches that led out into the planetary wilderness. The air felt thick and fetid, but Jace's respirator filter, combined with the modicum of fresh oxygen left in his pack, would suffice for a time. Kaera inhaled deeply, relying on her enhanced physiology to handle the noxious environment. The jungle lay ahead, an expanse of twisted trees and phosphorescent flora, the ground slick with mud and creeping vines. Stay close, Kaera murmured. Follow quietly. Jace nodded, adjusting his pack straps and gripping the sidearm. They ventured forth, each step squelching in the alien muck. The stench of decay was overpowering, and strange insect-like creatures buzzed around them, occasionally emitting chirps that resonated like tiny bells. The land seemed alive with menace, but also with a strange, otherworldly beauty. As they pressed deeper, the ship's wreckage faded from view behind the looming vegetation. Tall spires of twisted bark rose above them, forming a canopy that filtered the hazy light into sickly shades of green and yellow. Vines dripped with sticky, luminescent sap. Every so often, Kaera would pause, lifting her head, listening intently for sounds beyond Jace's comprehension. "What do you hear?" he whispered, scanning their surroundings nervously. Her tail stiffened, ears pricking forward. Distant clang. Metal on metal. Drones. He swallowed hard, feeling his heart thunder in his chest. "How far?" "Far," she said simply, then continued onward with a sort of graceful stealth that Jace could only envy. His own footsteps felt clumsy in comparison, though he tried to walk lightly. A gloom pervaded this alien forest, as though the planet itself harbored an ancient anger at any trespassers. They found a small clearing where the earth rose slightly, forming a natural vantage point. From there, they could make out the faint outlines of glinting metal, perhaps half a kilometer away. The silhouettes of small spider-like drones scuttled along, scanning the ground. They were methodical, their sensor arrays glowing like eerie lanterns in the gloom. "There," Kaera growled softly, pointing. "Hunters." Jace peered over, heart pounding. "They look heavily armored. If they detect us..." Kaera's lips curled back. "We run, or we fight. We know the land better." "Or I do," she corrected, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Not alone now." A strange warmth spread through Jace at her words. For all her feral nature, there was a certain protective loyalty about her that he found comforting, even stirring. The notion that she claimed he belonged to her was unnerving. Yet he could not deny a certain solidarity forming between them. They waited in tense silence as the drones moved along, scanning the environment. Thunder rumbled overhead, and the wind picked up, carrying acrid vapors through the trees. Eventually, the metallic shapes vanished behind a ridge. Jace exhaled, only then realizing he had been holding his breath. "We must keep moving," Kaera said. "Farther from them." Jace nodded, though a part of him worried about their eventual destination. Where could they possibly go? The planet offered no known haven, no friendly outpost. But the immediate concern was evading detection. One step at a time, he told himself, gripping his sidearm more tightly. As they traversed the dense foliage, a stray memory tugged at Jace's mind files he had once glimpsed concerning lost research outposts. There had been rumors of hidden bunkers on certain planets, built to withstand harsh conditions. If Project Feral had operated here, perhaps there was some old installation they could use as a sanctuary. Before he could voice the thought, Kaera signaled for him to stop, raising her claws in a silent command. From a nearby tangle of vines, something large slithered out, a reptilian predator of nightmarish proportion. Its scales shimmered with phosphorescence, and a frill of spines ran along its sinuous neck. The creature hissed, fixing them with slit pupil eyes. Jace's heart lurched. "We can't fight that," he whispered, glancing at Kaera. She merely bared her teeth in a savage grin, stepping forward. The predator coiled, preparing to strike. A standoff of primal ferocity seized the clearing, each heartbeat an eternity of dread. Then, with terrifying speed, the reptile lunged, jaws snapping. Kaera met the onslaught head-on. She sidestepped, claws flashing, raking across the beast's flank. It screeched, thrashing wildly. Jace fumbled, trying to take aim with the sidearm, but Kaera was too close, locked in a deadly dance. Her muscles rippled as she evaded another strike, planting a foot on a root and launching herself onto the creature's back. The predator bucked, hissing in fury. Jace realized Kaera was isolating the creature's vulnerable spots. She gripped its neck with one arm, her claws digging deep, while her other hand reached around for the angle to deliver a precise blow. The reptile slammed its tail onto the ground, attempting to throw her off. With a swift movement, Kaera sank her claws into the creature's throat. Blood spurted in a sickening arc. The beast gave a final spasmodic hiss, then collapsed heavily, stirring up clouds of acrid dust. Panting, Kaera rose covered in gore, a fierce triumph shining in her eyes. Jace stared, both horrified and in awe. "Remind me never to make you angry," he said shakily. A low chuckle escaped her. She approached him, wiping the splatter from her face, then regarded him intently. "My mate," she said suddenly, voice husky with emotion. "I protect." Jace's cheeks warmed beneath the respirator mask, and he couldn't find words. The raw, primal sincerity of her declaration was at once disconcerting and oddly touching. He managed a nod, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Thank you," he whispered, with the predator dispatched. The path ahead was momentarily clear. Kaera bent down and salvaged a few pieces of its hide, glancing at Jace. "Useful later," she explained. Her savage practicality left him with a blend of fascination and trepidation. They pressed on, mindful of any further threats. The forest seemed to protest each intrusion with menacing hisses, distant screeches, or the rustle of unseen creatures. Yet, Kaera's presence, her acute senses, and formidable skill kept them alive. Jace contributed where he could, using his scanner to detect toxic pockets of air or to find vantage points. Sometime later, they paused by a small stream that gurgled through the black soil. The water shimmered greenish-blue with chemical runoff, far from potable. Still, Kaera used a piece of the reptile's hide to filter out some visible debris before she rinsed her hands and face. Jace joined her, aware that their rest would be brief. In that quiet moment, he found himself studying her more carefully. Under the layers of feral attributes, there was a core of humanity. Her expressions conveyed more than simple rage or aggression. They spoke of longing, fear, determination, and, in fleeting glimpses, compassion. That such a creature would risk her life to keep him safe was a testament either to some ingrained programming from the Project Feral days or to a deeper moral sense that defied the cruelty of her creation. Kaera caught his gaze and tilted her head. "Why look?" she asked softly. He hesitated, uncertain how to explain the swirl of emotions in his chest. "I'm just thankful," he said at last, "for saving me, for not leaving me behind. I was afraid of you at first." Her mouth curved in what might have been a teasing grin, revealing sharp canines. "Still afraid." He managed a weak chuckle, meeting her eyes. "A little," he admitted, "but less than before." She nodded, accepting his honesty, then gently brushed his forehead with the back of her clawed hand. as though replicating some distant human gesture of comfort. A subtle purr-like sound vibrated in her throat, a sign of contentment or reassurance. Jace found the gesture unexpectedly tender. Their respite ended with the distant whirring of mechanical servos. The drones were drawing closer. Kaera jerked her head in the direction of the sound, and Jace grabbed his belongings. With renewed urgency, they faded back into the shadows of the dense vegetation, leaving behind the eerie glow of the polluted stream. The flight from these relentless pursuers had only just begun, and Jace sensed that in this unforgiving land, survival would be a precarious thing indeed. Night after restless night, day after uncertain day, they traveled through the planet's treacherous wilderness. Toxic mists clung to the ground, swirling around warped tree trunks that seemed to watch them with silent, gnarled faces. The ground squelched beneath their boots, and luminous insects darted through thick air that tasted of sulfur and grit. Despite the overwhelming alien hostility of the environment, Jace noticed a growing closeness between himself and Kaera. They spoke more often, teaching each other new words, bridging the gap between her feral idiom and his formal speech. Sometimes, by the flickering glow of a battered lamp he had salvaged from the ship, he would ask about her past, and she would share fragments of memory, painful recollections of labs, of men in uniforms, of nights spent locked in cages. The notion that any institution could treat her as an expendable experiment filled Jace with quiet rage. He saw her as a person, albeit different from any person he had known, but a person nonetheless. She might snarl and bare her claws, but beneath that primal exterior, she revealed empathy, intelligence, and surprising wit. In the meantime, the drones did not relent. Occasionally, they caught glimpses of mechanical shapes gliding through the underbrush, scanning, analyzing. More than once, Kaera dragged Jace into a hollowed trunk or beneath thick ferns to avoid the telltale beams of searchlights. When forced to engage, they sprang traps that Jace rigged with salvaged electronics, short-circuiting a few pursuing machines. Yet more arrived, seemingly endless. The hunters were systematic, determined. The pair discovered fleeting refuge in a deep ravine, where a labyrinth of twisting vines offered concealment. They scaled jagged rock faces, relying on Kaera's prowess to find footholds. At one perilous ledge, Jace slipped, nearly plummeting into the abyss. Kaera caught him by the wrist, hauling him back to safety with a snarl of determination. "Don't let go," he gasped, heart hammering wildly. She pulled him against her, pressing her face to his hair. "Never," she murmured, and he could feel the rapid drum of her own heartbeat. They lingered there, perched on a narrow outcrop, arms wrapped around each other, as acrid winds swept through the ravine. Jace shuddered at how close he had come to dying, but Kaera's ferocious devotion had saved him once again. In that moment, a trembling breath escaped him, and he felt something like gratitude, like affection, for this strange woman-beast who defied all logic. At length, they continued their climb, inch by painstaking inch, until they emerged atop the ravine onto a plateau. What they saw there momentarily drove all other thoughts from their minds. A structure, half buried and corroded, rose from the plateau's rocky ground. The remains of walls, girders, and collapsed roofs hinted at some artificial construction that had stood here decades, perhaps centuries, before. Faded emblems marked the outer panels, along with graffiti like symbols. Jace approached, heart racing. This could be a hidden bunker, an old research station, maybe even one of the lost outposts rumored to be connected to Project Feral. "Kaera, look," he whispered, kneeling by a rusted plaque near what might have once been a doorway. He cleared away grime to reveal faint lettering. CX9, Research Facility. Kaera's eyes narrowed, the fur on her neck bristling slightly. "Feral," she growled. "It might be dangerous," Jace conceded, "but maybe we'll find supplies. Or logs that explain more about your origins." She cast a wary glance around, then nodded. With caution, they pried open the twisted metal that covered the entrance. A stale gust of air rushed out, tainted with rot and chemicals. The hallway beyond was dark, lined with corroded pipes and the scattered debris of centuries. Using a small portable light, Jace led the way. The facility was an eerie tomb. Broken glass crunched under their feet. Old doors lined the corridor, sealed or jammed open by rust. A few flickering emergency strips still glowed faintly, as though refusing to die even after all these years. Kaera sniffed the air, her face contorting in disgust at the stale, chemical odor. They passed a collapsed section of ceiling that revealed a tangle of rebar and twisted metal. Graffiti covered the walls, scrawled in a language Jace did not recognize. Some sections bore scorch marks, bullet holes, telling of a violent end to whatever once transpired here. Eventually, they reached a larger chamber strewn with shattered monitors and warped laboratory equipment. A battered sign overhead read, "Sector B, Genetic Testing." The words made Jace's stomach clench. Kaera tensed beside him, tail thrashing. "This is the place," she whispered, voice trembling with fury. "They made us here, others too." Jace swallowed hard. "Us? You mean there were more like you?" She lowered her gaze, pained memories flickering in her eyes. They made a pack. Some died. Some left for other labs. I was forgotten, but others more perfect." A hush fell over them. Jace tried to picture a pack of beast humans, forcibly engineered, trained, tortured. How many had been scattered across the galaxy, sold off to mercenary groups, or quietly exterminated when the project ended? Anger rose in him, mingling with sadness and pity. Determined, he rummaged through the debris, searching for any functioning terminal that might shed light on the truth. Eventually, Kaera helped him pry open a rusted cabinet, revealing a set of data cards. Most were cracked or corroded, but Jace found one that looked intact. With painstaking care, he inserted the card into a portable reader. After several tries, a flicker of text scrolled across a cracked screen. "Project Feral, subject data, Kaera, batch 714. Jace's heart pounded. "There's a file on you," he said softly, meeting her eyes. Kaera crouched beside him, peering at the flickering text. Her literacy was limited, but she recognized her name. "Tell me," she murmured, voice thick with hesitation and a glimmer of hope. He skimmed the lines that remained legible. Subject designated Kaera. Advanced splicing protocol. Feline DNA hybridization for heightened reflexes, strength, and sensory acuity. Behavioral conditioning incomplete due to facility evacuation. Subject displayed aggression toward staff, resulting in multiple injuries. Decision to terminate subject reversed by order of Colonel Arisk for field testing. Subject forcibly relocated to Outpost Delta for final evaluation. Field testing, Jace repeated bitterly, feeling Kaera's tension coiling beside him. They were going to use you for some mission, but then they abandoned the project. He glanced at her ragged attire and the scars that crisscrossed her limbs. They never came back for you. Did they? She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. I was disposable. Jace set aside the data card, anger boiling in his chest. Not anymore, he said firmly. We'll make them regret it. If we can broadcast from here, maybe we can call for real help, or at least we can find a way off this planet that doesn't end with us both dead. As if spurred by his words, A faint alarm sounded in the distance, echoing through the facility's halls. Lights that had long lain dormant flickered to life, forming a sickly glow that accentuated the gloom. Somewhere deep within the complex, ancient machinery rumbled, as if awakened from a centuries-long sleep. Kaera's ears flattened. "We are not alone," she hissed, and Jace nodded grimly. The drones might have traced them here, or they might have triggered some leftover security protocol. A series of clangs reverberated through the corridors. Drawing closer, Jace stuffed the data card in his pouch and gripped his sidearm. Kaera flexed her claws, a low growl building in her chest. "Time to face the past," she said, her voice carrying a fierce resolve. Side by side, Jace agreed. The corridor reverberated with the echoes of mechanical footsteps, accompanied by the harsh hiss of hydraulic joints. Jace and Kaera pressed their backs against the cold metal wall, exchanging tense glances. His pulse hammered in his ears, but Kaera appeared deadly calm, shoulders coiled with readiness. "We lure them away from the labs," she whispered. "If we fight here, might destroy data, maybe we need it." Jace nodded, trying not to let fear overwhelm him. "We'll draw them into the open space near the entrance. Better vantage." Kaera responded with a curt nod, then signaled with one claw for him to move out. Together, they crept through the dim corridor, stepping gingerly over debris. The flickering emergency lighting cast their shadows in distorted shapes across the cracked walls. Jace tightened his grip on the sidearm, wishing for more ammunition. They reached a branching intersection, the overhead lights humming with renewed energy. One passage led deeper into the facility, while the other curved back toward the entrance. Footsteps grew louder, clanging, inhumanly steady. A moment later, two spider-like drones appeared, their sensor arrays glowing red in the gloom. They halted briefly, scanning the area with narrow beams of light. Before Jace could think to hide, Kaera let out a snarl and launched forward. The drones whirled to face her, metal limbs clicking. She sprang at the closest one with alarming speed, her claws raking across its sensor panel. Sparks erupted, and the machine tottered, struggling to reorient its turrets. The second drone leveled its weapon, a small pulse cannon built into its chassis. Jace fired 2 shots with the sidearm, both beams glancing harmlessly off the drone's thick plating. Gritting his teeth, he aimed for a joint in its mechanical legs and squeezed the trigger. This time, a spurt of sparks indicated a partial hit. Kaera dispatched the first drone with a savage blow, tearing into its control nodes. The machine spasmed, then collapsed in a twitching heap. She turned her attention to the second drone, which pivoted to target her. Jace kept firing, forcing the drone to split its attention. Kaera ducked beneath its legs, slashing upward at the base of its sensor array. With a shriek of tearing metal, the drone's head module wobbled, then fell off. The entire chassis collapsed, panting. Jace lowered the sidearm, half expecting more drones to appear. Kaera surveyed the wreckage, then yanked a small memory core from one of the drone's remains, dropping it into Jace's hands. "Can you read this?" He nodded, though he doubted any standard interface would remain intact in this old facility. "Maybe," he muttered. "Let's keep moving." They rushed toward the entrance zone, stepping over cracked floors and tangles of wiring. Another door led to a wide receiving bay, once used for cargo deliveries or supply runs. The overhead lights here were half broken, leaving large swaths in darkness. Piles of crates had rotted to near dust, but some seemed intact, stacked behind a chain-link partition. A surge of relief filled Jace upon seeing a half-functioning console near the center of the bay. If they could get power to it, maybe they could access the facility's systems. But any sense of optimism vanished when he spotted a larger drone stationed near the far side of the room, this one about the size of a small vehicle. with multiple turret appendages scanning in slow arcs. Down, Kaera hissed, pulling him behind a toppled crate. The heavy drone's footsteps thudded ominously, each step sending vibrations through the floor. Jace's mind raced. The sidearm barely took out a smaller drone. This behemoth was likely shielded. "We need an ambush," he whispered, voice trembling with adrenaline. Kaera peered over the crate, tail flicking. Distraction, then kill. His mouth felt dry. He rummaged through his pack, producing a small portable explosive device, one he had rigged from the ship's emergency flares, and some leftover capacitors. It was crude, but it might create a strong enough blast to disable the drone's shields if placed correctly. "I'll set this on a timer," he said. "We can lure it near that support column, blow it, and while its shields are down, we finish it." Kaera nodded, a fierce grin crossing her face. "Good plan." With shaking hands, Jace armed the device, setting it for a 15-second delay once activated. Kaera readied herself, muscles taut. Then, with a quick motion, she lobbed a small piece of debris across the bay to draw the drone's attention. The clatter echoed loudly in the cavernous chamber. The large drone paused, turrets swiveling toward the source. In that instant, Jace sprinted from cover, ducking behind another crate, closer to the support column. Sweat trickled down his forehead, both from the toxic heat and sheer terror. Kaera whistled sharply to keep the drone's sensors focused on her location, while Jace slid the explosive device behind the column's base. His trembling fingers set the timer. 15 seconds. He looked to Kaera, nodding once to signal. She let out a snarl and leaped from cover, bounding across the bay. The drone fixated on her, bright beams scanning her motion. As its turrets locked onto her position, Kaera dove behind a massive chunk of collapsed ceiling, panting. The drone advanced, each footstep a clang of doom. 10 seconds left. Jace crouched low, waiting in silent dread. The drone drew nearer to the column, weapon systems humming. At 5 seconds, Jace closed his eyes, braced himself. A bright flash and thunderous explosion rent the air. The shockwave knocked him flat, sending crates and debris flying. For a moment, smoke filled his vision, choking him. Then he heard Kaera's roar. The drone's shields crackled, temporarily flickering out. Sparks showered from the battered chassis. Still, it stood, pivoting with a damaged but functional turret. Kaera seized the opportunity, springing onto the drone's back. Jace staggered to his feet and fired his sidearm at the drone's turret interface, hoping to cripple its targeting system. A flurry of sparks indicated a partial success. The drone shuddered, whirring in protest. Meanwhile, Kaera clung to the machine, claws digging into armor plating. She pounded at a seam in the drone's casing, prying it open with brute force. With a savage snarl, she tore out a cluster of circuitry. The drone emitted a grinding shriek, legs flailing uncontrollably. Then toppled with a thunderous crash. Darkness claimed the bay once again, and an eerie stillness followed the battle. Kaera rolled free of the wreckage, breathing heavily, her face streaked with soot and sweat. Jace rushed to her side, scanning her for injuries. "You're all right." She grimaced but nodded. "Cuts, bruises, fine." He exhaled in relief, offering her a hand. They stood together amidst the shattered remains of the formidable drone. A wave of exhaustion washed over Jace, the adrenaline fading. "We did it," he breathed. Kaera met his gaze, her expression triumphant yet tinged with concern. "More will come," she said darkly. "Always more." Jace gazed at the battered console a few meters away. "Let's see if we can find anything useful before they arrive." They crossed the rubble-strewn bay, stepping carefully around the wrecked drone. Jace knelt before the console, brushing off layers of dust and shattered glass. He fiddled with the flickering screen, rerouting wires beneath the panel. The battered system hummed to life, lines of garbled code scrolling past. Kaera stood guard, scanning the perimeter. Her ears twitched at every creak of metal, every distant hiss of toxic wind through the broken walls. Jace typed commands, bypassing security measures. "It's partially functional," he muttered. "Let's see if I can access the facility mainframe." A shaky interface emerged, prompting for credentials. Jace typed a series of overrides he had learned in his travels, generic backdoor codes used by the old Terran conglomerate. To his surprise, one of them worked. The console chirped, revealing a menu of archived files, many marked as restricted. Project Feral. Kaera drifted closer, her voice hushed with tension. "Find something about me, or about them." Jace nodded, opening various logs. Fragmented text filled the screen, referencing batch numbers, splicing protocols, field trials. The deeper he delved, the more horrifying the details became: forced hybridization, chemical conditioning, mental reprogramming. The final entries described a decision by high-ranking officials to bury the project, scattering the subjects to remote corners of the galaxy or exterminating them outright. "Monsters," Jace whispered, eyes damp with anger. "They played with lives, then discarded them." Kaera read over his shoulder as best she could, trembling with fury. "They put us in cages, taught us to kill, then threw us away like broken tools." Jace placed a comforting hand on her arm. "We'll make them pay," he promised, though the vow sounded hollow in the face of such atrocities. "If we can download this data, expose it, maybe the greater galaxy would rally against them." She exhaled shakily. "Yes, show truth." He inserted the drone's memory core into a side port on the console, hoping the facility's interface could read it. To his relief, lines of code appeared, indicating logs of recent transmissions. His eyes widened. "Kaera, look at this," he said, pointing to a timestamp. It corresponded to only hours after the venturing star crashed. "It's a directive," he continued, reading the text. "From an orbiting patrol ship, they detected our crash and relayed orders to these hunter drones on the surface. Their mission is to eliminate any survivors and secure Project Feral assets." Kaera let out a fierce growl. "So it is them, the ones who made me." Jace nodded grimly. "They're still active, or at least a branch of them. We need to disable that patrol ship, or at least evade it, if we want a chance to escape. Otherwise, they'll track us forever." She frowned, tail lashing. "How fight a ship in orbit?" A heavy silence followed. Jace scanned the console again. "There might be an old launch pad near here, or some stored vessel we can fix," he said, though the idea was more hope than certainty. He tapped further into the system, scrolling through facility schematics. "Look, there's mention of a sub-level hangar." Kaera arched a brow. "You think a ship remains? We won't know unless we check," Jace replied. He pointed to the screen. "The route is complicated, but there might be an elevator shaft or stairwell leading down from Sector D." Even as they spoke, a tremor shook the facility. Somewhere, metal beams groaned in protest, and a wave of dust cascaded from the ceiling. The battered infrastructure was on the brink of collapse. Another quake, or a strong enough explosion, could bring the entire complex down. "Let's move," Kaera said, urgency in her tone. Jace nodded, saving copies of the data onto his portable drive. With the memory core in hand, they left the cargo bay. The corridors beyond were labyrinthine, strewn with debris and half-flooded in places by chemical runoff. The overhead lights flickered in half-bursts, lending the journey a nightmarish ambiance. Footsteps echoed on occasion, staccato mechanical steps that warned of more drones patrolling the halls. Kaera led the way, her senses honed to every sound, every movement. Jace followed, occasionally consulting a battered map on the console's portable display. At last, they reached a sealed bulkhead labeled Sector D Access. A keypad flickered red, locked by ancient security protocols. Jace worked quickly, bypassing the code with the same overrides he had used before. With a hiss of escaping air, the door slid open, revealing a dark stairwell that descended into gloom. A stale odor wafted up, reminiscent of decaying chemicals and rust. Jace switched on a small handheld lamp, illuminating worn steps that spiraled downward. Kaera tested the first few steps, then waved for Jace to follow. The air grew colder, more oppressive, the deeper they went. Streams of condensation dripped from overhead pipes, trickling along the walls in meandering rivulets. Halfway down, they heard a distant rumble, possibly more drones, or the facility shifting. They pressed on, eventually reaching a landing where a rusted sign declared hangar access restricted personnel only. Jace felt his pulse quicken. If a ship lay beyond, even a small craft, they might stand a chance of escaping. He stepped forward, shining the lamp through the half-open door. The beam revealed a vast chamber with a high ceiling, lined with catwalks and dormant machinery. Thick spiderwebs draped from every corner, shimmering with toxic condensation. A battered sign read Hangar B12. Kaera slipped inside, scanning the shadows. Quiet, she breathed, but not safe. Jace followed, carefully picking his way across the dusty floor. They passed rusted forklifts and stacked crates that had long since collapsed into ruin. The darkness beyond their lamp's reach was profound, seemingly alive with hidden shapes. Jace's heartbeat thundered as he contemplated the possibility of a craft left behind in workable condition. The beam of light swept across a hulking outline near the far wall, a ship-like silhouette. Jace sucked in a breath, rushing closer. It appeared to be a small corvette, battered and partially dismantled, but structurally intact. Faded markings on the hull indicated it was once part of the research facility's official fleet. "We might fix this," Jace murmured, voice quivering with excitement. Kaera eyed the craft warily. "Fast enough to escape. If it can fly at all," he said. "It's old, but maybe there are parts we can salvage from around here to repair it." They approached a lowered cargo ramp at the vessel's rear, the metal corroded but still intact. Jace found a manual release lever and yanked it, protesting the squeal of rusted gears. The ramp descended with a groan, revealing a dim interior that smelled of stale air. Inside, they discovered a cramped cargo hold with a few stacked containers. A corridor led toward the cockpit and living quarters. Jace's eyes gleamed with possibility, but his optimism was tempered by the knowledge that time was running out, and the hunters would not remain idle. "Let's see if the power core is salvageable," he suggested, making his way toward the engine room. Kaera followed, watchful. The engine compartment was cluttered with disassembled parts, tangles of wiring, and a large cylindrical reactor unit. Dust coated every surface. Jace knelt to inspect the reactor, brushing away grime. "It's a fusion microreactor," he said, a hopeful note in his voice. "I've worked with older models like this in the shipyards. We'll need new coolant lines and a functioning ignition coil, but it's not beyond repair." Kaera circled the compartment, scanning for any hidden threats. "We do it fast," she said. "Hunters come soon." Jace nodded, rolling up his sleeves. "I'll need to scavenge parts from the hangar, maybe from other machinery. You keep watch," she agreed, and he set to work. Time blurred as he rummaged through the vessel's corners and the hangar's debris. hunting for anything that might serve as a replacement part. In the gloom, every clank of metal seemed amplified, every hiss of air a potential threat. Yet Kaera was a diligent guard, fending off a couple of smaller drones that wandered into the chamber. The sound of her fierce growls and rending metal echoed in the distance, but she always returned triumphant, albeit with fresh scratches. Bit by bit, Jace reassembled the reactor's vital components. Using the remnants of his specialized knowledge and the limited resources at hand, sparks flew as he welded patchwork pipes, bridging corroded gaps. The hours stretched on, each moment ripe with the fear that an overwhelming force of hunters would flood the hangar. Kaera checked the perimeter periodically, returning with updates. When at last Jace closed the final panel on the reactor, his hands trembled with fatigue. He looked up at Kaera, who stood with her arms crossed, tail swishing in anxious arcs. "Moment of truth," he muttered. He flipped a series of switches on the nearby control panel. For a tense second, nothing happened. Then the reactor hummed, a feeble glow emanating from its core. Lights flickered throughout the ship's corridors. A faint swirl of air stirred the dust. Jace let out a disbelieving laugh. "It's working." Kaera's eyes lit with cautious hope. "We can leave." "Maybe," Jace said, tapping controls to check the ship's status. A holographic display sputtered to life, indicating multiple system errors, but the engines were listed as operational in standby. "We'll need to clear the hangar doors, or blow them open, and we'll have to hope the hull can withstand the planet's atmosphere." She offered a small, toothy smile. "We try," gathering what supplies they could. They moved to the cockpit. The pilot's seat was dusty. The console cracked, but the instrumentation flickered with the faint promise of functionality. Jace quickly ran diagnostics, wincing at the red warnings. "Structural integrity is compromised. We'll need to run a calibration on the thrusters, or we'll never get off the ground." Kaera gripped his shoulder. "They come," she warned, ears pricked. He paused, hearing the distant hum of approaching servos. The hunters must have tracked them. "Then we do this now," he whispered, swallowing his fear. Kaera barricaded the hangar doors with whatever debris she could muster, buying Jace a few crucial minutes to calibrate the thrusters. The console beeped angrily, spitting out error messages faster than he could clear them. Sweat dripped down his brow, stinging his eyes, but he forced himself to focus. Behind him, the corridor shook with the impact of drone weaponry blasting at the barricade. Metal squealed. Beams of light cut through the cracks. A swirling haze of dust and chemical residue filled the air, turning every breath into a harsh rasp. "Hurry, Jace," Kaera urged, standing at the cockpit doorway, sidearm in hand. "I'm trying," he spat, fingers flying over the archaic controls. The thrusters hissed, sputtering once, then roared to life with a guttural vibration that rattled the entire ship. The overhead panels flickered in protest, but the status readout turned from red to a cautious yellow. "That'll have to do," Jace said, standing up. He darted past Kaera, heading for the main cargo ramp's internal controls. "We need to open the hangar bay roof. Stand clear." Kaera followed close behind, her gaze flicking worriedly to the battered barricade. Sparks flew as the drones finally began to penetrate, metallic limbs clawing through twisted metal. Jace yanked down a lever on a nearby wall, and ancient motors groaned overhead. The massive hangar roof started to part, revealing the planet's toxic sky. Wind rushed in, swirling dust and debris, carrying the acrid stench of sulfur. The drones, seizing their opening, surged past the barricade, mechanical limbs skittering across the floor. One fired a pulse beam that struck Kaera's shoulder, spinning her around with a grunt of pain. Jace returned fire with the sidearm. though the drone's armor withstood most of his shots. Blood trickled from Kaera's wound, but her eyes glowed with fury. She sprinted forward, sliding beneath a volley of pulse beams, then slashed the drone's legs out from under it. Another one advanced, turrets whirring. Jace tried to create a distraction, firing into its sensor array. A few blasts connected, buying Kaera time to pounce. A flurry of sparks lit the gloom as she tore into the machine. The ship's engines roared louder, trembling the floor beneath their feet. The hangar roof inched open, letting in pale, sickly daylight. Jace cast a desperate glance at Kaera. "We have to get aboard now," she nodded, hurling aside the remains of the drone she had just demolished. More mechanical shapes clanked in the corridor, an entire wave of reinforcements, unstoppable by mere barricades. Jace and Kaera sprinted up the Corvette's cargo ramp, sealing it behind them. The ship's interior lights flickered uncertainly, but the engine's thrumming offered a glimmer of hope. Jace raced to the cockpit, Kaera close on his heels. He dropped into the pilot's seat and began flipping switches. "I'm not really a pilot," he muttered through clenched teeth, "but I can do enough to get us into orbit, maybe." Kaera strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat, awkwardly mimicking the motions she had seen others do. "Better than stay here," she growled, still clutching her wounded shoulder. With a shaky breath, Jace engaged the thrusters. The ship shuddered, dust shaking from the ceiling. Outside the cockpit windows, the jagged hangar walls glowed with the reflection of the Corvette's engines. A klaxon warning blared from the console, structural instability. "Come on, girl," Jace pleaded, coaxing the ship. He increased thrust power. The Corvette lurched, lifting a few meters off the ground. Down below, the drones scrambled, some climbing the walls or firing at the hull, their beams leaving scorch marks along the battered plating. Kaera bared her teeth at them through the cockpit's glass. "Faster," she urged, voice tight with pain from her wound. Another volley of drone fire rocked the ship, and the main console sparked ominously. Jace grit his teeth, ignoring the frantic error messages. He tilted the controls forward, pushing the Corvette upward. Metal screeched as they scraped the edge of the hangar roof. Then they were free, rising into the swirling, toxic atmosphere. Thunderheads of noxious clouds closed around them, lightning flickering in unearthly shades of green and purple. The controls jerked in Jace's hands, the Corvette buffeted by violent turbulence. Alarms shrieked. "Hull integrity is at 57%. He read off with mounting panic. Kaera let out a low growl, pressing a hand to her wounded shoulder. "We keep going," she hissed, as though sheer willpower could hold the hull together, pushing the engines to their limit. Jace angled the Corvette toward the upper atmosphere. The thick toxic air gave way to thinner stratospheric layers, and the star-speckled void beyond tantalized them. But the readouts beeped in protest, indicating catastrophic strain on the hull. "We're almost there," Jace muttered through clenched teeth. "If we can break atmo, maybe." A searing lance of energy sliced past the cockpit, jolting the Corvette violently. Jace gasped as the instrumentation flickered. Outside, in the near-orbit skies, a dark silhouette loomed, a small patrol cruiser, bristling with weaponry. "They found us," Kaera snarled. Eyes locked on the looming warship, Jace hammered at the console, trying to reroute power to the forward shields. Sparks burst from an overhead panel, and the Corvette shook under another salvo of directed energy blasts. "Shields at minimal strength," he reported, wincing. "We can't take many hits." Kaera slammed a fist against the armrest. "We fight. Or run." "Running won't help," Jace said grimly. "They'll outrun us in open space. We either disable them, or..." Before he could finish, another beam struck, sending the Corvette spinning. Red lights flooded the cockpit. Hull integrity plummeted to below 40%. A rattle in the engine indicated possible meltdown if they pushed too hard. With a desperate lunge, Jace stabilized the ship. "Hang on," he warned, gripping the controls so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I'm going to try something risky." He angled the Corvette in a seemingly suicidal approach toward the cruiser, hugging close to the planet's gravitational boundary. The atmosphere raged beneath them, swirling in neon storms. The cruiser pivoted, weapon ports flaring. "Steady," Jace breathed. A high-energy beam cut across their bow, scraping the Corvette's shields. Jace pulled the trigger on the meager forward cannons, unleashing a pitiful barrage of energy rounds. Most fizzled against the cruiser's hull. Kaera growled in frustration. Not enough. But Jace had another plan. He dived, pulling the Corvette dangerously close to the swirling storm clouds, forcing the cruiser to angle downward in pursuit. Lightning crackled along the hull. The Corvette groaned in protest. Jace scanned the sensors, noticing a buildup of static charge in the swirling atmosphere. "Here we go," he whispered, coaxing the Corvette lower. The cruiser, presumably under orders to ensure they did not escape, followed relentlessly, continuing its barrage. One shot seared the Corvette's flank. Breaching an aft compartment, alarms blared. Kaera shouted, clinging to her seat. Jace forced the Corvette into an evasive turn. Weaving through pockets of supercharged air, bolts of greenish lightning arsed from the swirling clouds, dancing dangerously close. "Just a little more," he muttered, scanning for a particularly volatile region. Suddenly, a massive bolt of lightning lanced down, striking the cruiser's starboard side. The warship shuddered, its shields flaring bright, then dimming. Jace seized the moment, firing the Corvette's cannons with everything they had left. The barrage slammed into the cruiser's compromised shields, breaching them. A chain reaction rippled across the cruiser's hull as power relays overloaded. The warship wobbled, struggling to maintain altitude. Kaera let out a triumphant yell, baring her fangs. "Now," Jace hissed, pulling the Corvette away from the swirling storm. "We get out of here." The cruiser attempted to follow, but arcs of lightning continued to strike its unshielded hull. One more catastrophic hit sent the warship plummeting, smoke pouring from its engines. Jace and Kaera watched, breathless, as it disappeared into the roiling clouds below. A distant explosion rumbled afterward, indicating the cruiser's demise. "Gone," Kaera said softly, eyes wide with disbelief. Jace exhaled a shaky breath, feeling a surge of relief. "We did it. We survived." The battered Corvette, sporting multiple hull breaches and dangerously low power reserves, cleared the planet's upper atmosphere at last. Beyond lay the star-laced expanse of space, vast and full of possibilities. Jace set a course for open territory, hoping to find a safe harbor or at least a place to enact emergency repairs. Kaera slumped in her seat, exhaustion etched across her face. Yet when Jace glanced over, he saw gratitude and an unspoken warmth in her gaze. He reached out, gently clasping her hand. "We're free," he murmured. "For now, at least." She nodded, a faint smile quirking her lips. "Free," she echoed, glancing at the swirling planet behind them. "No more cages." Despite the ravages of the planet, the hostility of the drones, and the uncertain path ahead, Jace felt an unexpected swell of hope. They had escaped the nightmare, forging a bond in the crucible of danger. Now, it was time to find a future worthy of their struggle. The Corvette limped through the star system, engines sputtering. Diagnostic readouts showed multiple hull breaches, failing thrusters, and dangerously low fuel reserves. Jace's face was streaked with sweat and grime, as he guided the vessel toward a faint signal that might be an automated station or a way station. Kaera tended to her wound in the co-pilot seat, wincing at the sting of antiseptic. Though genetically enhanced, she still felt pain keenly, and the extent of her injuries worried Jace. "I'll look for a medical kit," he said, rummaging beneath the cockpit console. She nodded, offering a tight-lipped smile. "We have come far," she murmured, voice tinged with exhaustion. Jace paused, regarding her with concern. "Hey, we'll be all right," he said. Finding a battered med pack, he knelt beside her, gingerly applying a coagulant foam to the wound on her shoulder. Her muscles tensed, but she did not pull away. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, their gazes locked, a quiet intimacy passing between them that transcended words. Jace felt his heart tighten, recalling all they had endured together: crash, pursuit, near-death battles, and a hair's breadth escape from that planet. He finished dressing her wound, then helped her secure a makeshift sling. "It'll help until we can find a real medic," he said gently. Kaera nodded, rolling her shoulder experimentally. A weak purr-like sound of relief escaped her. "Where to now?" she asked. Jace sank into the pilot's seat again, scanning star charts from the Corvette's archaic navigation system. "There's a fringe station about 3 parsecs out. If these charts are still accurate, DX 779, it might be abandoned or run by smugglers. But it's our best shot." Kaera mulled it over, her tail swishing. "You trust them?" He let out a humorless laugh. "I don't even know if they still exist, but we're in no shape to pick and choose." The fuel gauge hovered near critical. Jace sighed, setting a course for the station. The Corvette lurched into sublight travel, the battered engines whining. Each moment, the possibility of catastrophic failure loomed, but they pressed on, driven by sheer necessity. Hours stretched into an eternity. Kaera dozed fitfully, her breathing ragged, while Jace alternated between babysitting the engines and scanning the dark reaches of space for any sign of pursuit. Though they had disabled the patrol cruiser, there was no guarantee that some other group wouldn't come looking for them. Finally, a glimmer appeared on the Corvette's sensors, a small cluster of metallic structures orbiting a desolate planetoid. Faint transmissions filtered through the static. Jace guided the ship closer, identifying it as the rumored station. The place looked half derelict, with large sections unlit. "Let's hope they don't shoot us on sight," he muttered, adjusting the Corvette's approach. He sent out a standard docking request, though he doubted anyone was listening. A moment later, to his surprise, a crackling voice responded, "Unknown vessel, identify yourself." Kaera stirred, watching Jace with a mixture of curiosity and worry. He pressed the transmit button. "This is a freighter Corvette, requesting emergency docking," he replied, omitting details. "We've sustained heavy damage." There was a long pause. Eventually, the station's comm channel came to life. "Docking Bay 5 is open. Payment for services is due upon entry. Weapons are not permitted." Jace let out a breath of relief. Understood. He guided the Corvette into the station's docking port, navigating rusted scaffolding and flickering beacons. The interior pressurization took effect as the bay's doors sealed behind them. Finally, the Corvette settled onto the deck with a tremor, engines sputtering their last breath. Kaera and Jace exchanged weary glances. "We made it," he said softly. Kaera exhaled, unfastening her harness. "Now we see what welcome we get." The docking bay was dimly lit, industrial in design, with a handful of personnel moving about. They wore mismatched jumpsuits and carried energy rifles slung over their shoulders, a sign that this station's inhabitants were a ragtag bunch, likely mercenaries or smugglers. A greasy haze hung in the air, and the smell of burnt metal stung Jace's nostrils as he lowered the Corvette's ramp. Kaera stepped out beside him, shoulders squared despite her wounds. Her feline features drew immediate stares from the gathered crew. A few stepped back in alarm. Others gripped their weapons, uncertain of what they were facing. A tall figure in a stained uniform approached. Flanked by two armed guards, he eyed Jace, then Kaera. "You look like trouble," he said bluntly, ignoring a more customary greeting. "We just need repairs," Jace said, hands raised placatingly. "And medical supplies for my friend." The man squinted at Kaera. "Some sort of hybrid, eh? We don't usually let non-humans in here unless they pay extra," Kaera snarled, and Jace quickly placed a hand on her arm to steady her. "We'll pay," he said hastily, though in truth, he had little to offer. The man jerked his thumb at the battered Corvette. "That crate of yours is falling apart. Don't expect a miracle from our mechanics, but they'll see if it can be patched up. Payment is up front, plus a docking fee." Jace swallowed, rummaging in his utility belt for a small pouch of credit chips. He had a few left from his last job, but not nearly enough for major repairs. Perhaps bartering was the only way. "Look, I can help fix it myself. I'm a technician. Docking fees non-negotiable," the station boss interrupted, eyeing the meager credit chips Jace offered. He sighed, then snapped his fingers at a subordinate. "Take them to the medbay. We'll discuss payment plans after we see what's left of their ship." The guards stepped aside, allowing Jace and Kaera to move deeper into the station. The environment was cramped and dirty, corridors lined with flickering neon signs advertising questionable services. Stray wires dangled from the ceiling, and the occasional hiss of steam from broken pipes made Kaera twitch in alarm. They reached a dingy medical bay, staffed by an older woman with an air of weary competence. She gave Kaera a once-over and shook her head. "I've seen some gene-modded mercs, but she's something else," the doctor remarked, motioning for Kaera to sit on a rickety cot. Jace hovered, worry etched into his expression. "Please, can you help her?" the doctor grunted, injecting Kaera with a broad-spectrum antibiotic. "Wound's not too deep, but you left it untreated for too long. She'll mend quickly if I patch it properly. You want me to do a full genetic scan?" Kaera bristled at the suggestion, baring her teeth. No scan," she hissed. "Right," the doctor murmured, raising an eyebrow but not pressing the issue. She swiftly treated Kaera's wounds, applying a coagulant bandage. "That'll be 50 credits." Jace winced, handing over another precious chip. The station was already proving expensive, but at least Kaera would heal now. After finishing, the doctor waved them off. "Pay up or get out." They retreated to the corridor, where the station boss reappeared with a grim expression. "Your ship's a wreck," he declared, arms folded. "You'll need new thruster components, hull plating, a full reactor flush. That's 1,000 credits, minimum." Jace's face fell. "That's impossible. We don't have that kind of money." Kaera glowered, fists tightening. "We fight for it, if we must." The boss's guards tensed, but he simply smirked. "I've got a better idea. You both seem capable. We got a little problem around here. A pirate scum's been harassing our supply routes, scaring off trade." The station boss scratched his chin. "You bring me that pirate's head, or drive them off for good, and I'll consider it fair payment for the repairs." Kaera exchanged a questioning look with Jace, who sighed. They had just escaped one deadly gauntlet, and now they were faced with another. But what choice did they have? Without the Corvette, they were stranded again. "Fine," Jace said softly, ignoring the dread gnawing at his stomach. "We'll do it." Their new mission became clear: hunt down the pirate, a local menace named Rageous Thorn, whose small fleet terrorized the fringes of this star system. The station boss gave them meager intel, last known coordinates near an asteroid belt, a small base cobbled together from salvaged freighters. "We do this quickly," Kaera said, tail flicking with residual irritation. Her bandaged shoulder still hurt, but her enhanced constitution was already aiding recovery. Jace agreed, though he dreaded the prospect of conflict. He was no soldier, just a technician relying on luck, cunning, and a bit of desperation. But if it meant repairing their ship and securing a path forward, they would face the pirate threat. They managed to borrow a small, beat-up shuttle from the station boss. In exchange for leaving Kaera as collateral, an arrangement she vehemently refused at first, baring her claws at the mere suggestion. "No," she snarled at the boss. "I go with him." The boss scowled. "You'll run off and never come back," he accused. Jace, seeing Kaera's rising fury, quickly interceded. "We'll leave some gear behind, something valuable," he said, removing his portable data drive from a pouch. Inside were the logs and evidence of Project Feral. It was precious, but he had no choice. The boss eyed it, unimpressed. "What's in here worth anything?" "Information," Jace said, keeping his tone steady. "You can sell it, use it as leverage. Believe me, it's valuable." The boss shrugged. "Fine, you got 3 days." He snatched the data drive, slipping it into a pocket. "If you don't come back, we'll keep your Corvette and this." Kaera glared at Jace, but he squeezed her hand. "We'll get it back," he whispered. "We have to trust them for now." Reluctantly, she acquiesced, and they departed aboard the battered shuttle. The vessel was barely spaceworthy, its controls clunky, and its engines prone to sputtering, but it would suffice to explore the asteroid belt. As they neared the region of floating rock and debris, the sensor suite picked up signs of a small outpost built into a larger asteroid. Several smaller vessels patrolled the perimeter, each emblazoned with a crude skull insignia. Jace's stomach churned. "Pirates. All right," he murmured. Kaera leaned over the console. "We sneak in. Let's see if we can approach quietly," Jace replied, powering down some of the shuttle systems to minimize their sensor profile. He guided the craft into the asteroid field, weaving through clusters of tumbling boulders. The darkness of space was lit only by the distant star and faint reflections off the asteroid surfaces. They soon spotted a docking port carved into the largest asteroid, where a few pirate vessels were docked. Automated turrets perched along the outpost's exterior, scanning for threats. Kaera studied the layout, her heightened vision discerning details Jace could not. "Turrets to the left, a big one on the far side," she remarked. "We can slip behind that cluster of rocks, maybe." Jace nodded, carefully steering the shuttle. He found a suitable spot in the asteroid's shadow to set down. The vessel's clamps engaged, anchoring them to the rotating mass. Through the cockpit window, they had a vantage point of the pirate base's entry points. "Now what?" Kaera asked. Jace's heart pounded. They were far outnumbered, and the base bristled with defenses. "We need to sabotage their defenses. Maybe force them to negotiate." Kaera flexed her claws, baring her teeth. "Or take out Rageous Thorn. Without their leader, pirates scatter." He glanced at her, recalling her lethal prowess. The plan was risky, but the alternative was an all-out assault they could never win. "Okay," he conceded. "Let's find a way in." They donned minimal protective gear spacesuits, patched from the shuttle's storage. Jace carried a basic pulse pistol, while Kaera relied on her claws and raw strength. With careful steps, they exited the shuttle via an airlock and clambered along the asteroid's surface, using magnetic boots to keep from drifting away. Stars glittered around them, silent witnesses to their perilous approach. The outpost loomed ahead, A cluster of metal structures fused to the rock. Emblems of Thorn's crew were splashed across the hull, a stylized skull ringed by jagged lines, reaching a smaller side hatch that seemed seldom used. Jace used his toolkit to bypass the lock. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a dim corridor lit by flickering overhead lights. They entered cautiously, weapons at the ready. Within minutes, they encountered their first guard, a surly pirate tinkering with a console. Kaera sprang upon him silently, knocking him out with a precise strike before he could sound an alarm. Jace winced at the brutality, but knew it was necessary. They pressed deeper into the base. Passing cargo holds full of stolen goods, crates of weapon parts, sealed canisters of contraband. The entire facility reeked of neglect and ill-gotten gains. At each intersection, Kaera paused, ears twitching, listening for footsteps or voices. Finally, they reached a central control room where three pirates chatted idly, rifles leaning against the wall. A large window offered a view of the surrounding asteroid field. Jace signaled Kaera to wait, then lobbed a small sonic grenade he had improvised from the shuttle's emergency equipment. The device emitted a disorienting pulse, sending the pirates staggering, clutching their ears. Kaera rushed in, dispatching them swiftly, leaving them unconscious on the floor. Jace took over the console, scanning readouts. Thorn's personal ship is docked in the next bay, he murmured, eyes darting across the screen. He's probably there. He tapped a few keys, disabling the outpost's automated turrets. It wouldn't prevent reinforcements from outside, but at least they wouldn't get blasted leaving the station. Kaera brushed her claws along the console, impressed by the flickering lights. "Let's find Thorn," she growled. They followed the corridor, encountering pockets of resistance, a few pirates here and there, who either fought briefly or fled in terror at the sight of Kaera's furious assault. Alarms blared, red lights flashing. Jace's pulse thundered in his ears, adrenaline fueling each step. Finally, they emerged into a wide bay housing a sleek pirate cutter, armed with numerous forward cannons. A tall, imposing figure with a cybernetic arm stood at the ship's boarding ramp, barking orders to scrambling underlings. Rageous Thorn. He turned as Jace and Kaera approached, a sneer crossing his scarred face. "Who dares step into my domain?" he roared, leveling a large plasma rifle. Kaera hissed, tail lashing. "We do. Surrender or die." Thorn barked a laugh. "I've killed beasts bigger than you." He aimed the rifle, unleashing a barrage of plasma bolts that scorched the floor and walls. Jace dove behind a crate, returning fire with his pistol. Kaera darted aside, rolling to evade the blasts, then sprang forward in a blinding rush. Thorn swung the rifle like a club, striking Kaera mid-lunge. She staggered, regaining her balance with a snarl. He fired again, but she was too close, deflecting the barrel with her claws. Sparks flew. The rifle spun from Thorn's grip. In the chaos, Jace emerged from cover, firing at Thorn's legs. One shot caught the pirate's calf, making him roar in pain. Kaera seized the moment, raking her claws across Thorn's chest. He gasped, stumbling backward, pinned against the hull of his cutter. Blood trickled from the gashes in his armor. "Now, you pay." Kaera snarled, raising a clawed hand to strike again. Thorn coughed, defiance flaring in his eyes. "You think this will end me?" He raised his cybernetic arm, which crackled with built-in weaponry. A bright arc of electricity scorched Kaera's side, knocking her backward with a shriek of pain. Jace cried out, sprinting forward. Thorn turned the weapon on him, but Jace fired first. A direct hit to Thorn's shoulder. Sparks erupted from the cybernetic implant, shorting it out. Thorn let out a guttural scream, Slumping to the floor, Kaera, panting, clutched her scorched side. She staggered to her feet, eyes blazing with fury. Thorn glared at them both, trembling. "Kill me!" Then, he spat. Jace aimed the pistol at Thorn's head. He recalled the station boss's words, "Bring me the pirate's head." But did he have the stomach for cold-blooded execution? Kaera growled low in her throat, her instincts urging her to finish the job. But she hesitated, glancing at Jace. In that moment, something in his expression made her pause. "We don't have to kill him," Jace said through gritted teeth. "We just need him neutralized." He fished out a pair of restraints from a nearby supply box, binding Thorn's hands. The pirate glared daggers, cursing them. Kaera let out a slow breath, tension draining from her limbs. She slumped against Jace, who supported her gently. They dragged Thorn back to the control room, broadcasting a message across the outpost's comm. "Stand down, or your leader dies." Reluctant, fearful compliance followed. The pirates, faced with their incapacitated commander, began to surrender, dropping weapons. By the time Jace and Kaera were done, the outpost was under their makeshift control. Thorn remained bound, seething in silence. Kaera slumped into a chair, nursing her wounds. Jace let out a shaky laugh of disbelief. "We did it, I think," she nodded. Exhaustion etched into every line of her posture. "Take him back. Get our ship fixed. Get that data back." Jace placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. "Yes," he said gently. "Then we can be done with all of this." A flicker of relief crossed her feline features. Their path was fraught with danger still, but for the moment, they had seized a victory. Word traveled quickly once Thorn was captured. His underlings, lacking leadership and confronted by Kaera's terrifying capabilities, capitulated. Jace negotiated with them to ensure no one tried a last-minute betrayal. In exchange for sparing Thorn's life, they agreed to release any stolen resources from the outpost, enough to at least offset some of the station's losses. Hauling Thorn aboard the battered shuttle proved a challenge, given Kaera's injuries. But eventually, they returned to the fringe station with their infamous prisoner in tow. The station boss, upon seeing Thorn bound and bruised, broke into a wide grin. "That's a job well done," he crowed, clapping Jace on the back. "Didn't expect you two to pull it off. This is definitely worth the repairs." Jace wobbled under the enthusiastic blow, glancing at Kaera. She stood behind him, silent and watchful, her expression torn between relief and lingering distrust. "We also want our data drive back," Jace reminded. The boss waved dismissively. Sure. He fished the device from his pocket and tossed it over. Barely had time to look at it. Anyway, a wave of relief washed over Jace. He tucked the drive safely into his belt. Kaera exhaled softly, tension easing from her stance. Their secrets remained theirs to wield if necessary. "Let's see your ship," the boss said, leading them back to the docking bay, where their damaged corvette lay in disrepair. True to his word, mechanics were already bustling around the hull, removing warped plating, installing new components. Jace's eyes shone with gratitude, even as he noted the station's shoddy resources. At least it was better than nothing. Over the next 2 days, they worked alongside the station's crew, patching the corvette's thrusters, welding hull fractures, and flushing the reactor of contaminated coolant. Despite the limited supplies, progress was steady, fueled by the prospect of having a fully functional ship once more. Kaera aided where she could, though the strain of her injuries forced her to rest periodically. During a lull in the repairs, Jace and Kaera found themselves alone in a small maintenance room, away from prying eyes. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed over her chest, gazing at him with an inscrutable expression. "We did well," she murmured. He nodded, stepping closer. We did, and I thank you, Kaera, for saving me so many times. I know all this has been, well, insane. She offered a faint grin, revealing her sharp canines. You are mine, she said softly, brushing a clawed hand over his cheek with unexpected gentleness. I protect you. Heat flooded Jace's face. He placed a hand over hers, letting the quiet sincerity of her words sink in. And you're mine, he said, voice trembling slightly. I mean, you're not my property, but, he hesitated, struggling to articulate the bond forming between them. Kaera's eyes softened, her tail swishing in contentment. We belong together, she whispered, bridging that linguistic gap in a gentle compromise. Jace's heart pounded, a wave of emotion washing over him. Carefully, he leaned in, pressing his forehead against hers in a gesture of closeness. Yes, he said simply. They stood there for a long moment, letting the hum of the station around them fade into the background. In this respite from chaos and danger, an unspoken vow formed between them, to protect one another, to seek a future in which neither was an experiment, a discarded asset, or a fugitive. Together, they would forge their own path. Repairs on the Corvette concluded on the third day. The patched hull bore mismatched plating, and the thrusters rattled ominously if pushed too hard. But the ship was spaceworthy once more. Jace tested the engines, relief flooding him when they roared to life without collapsing. The station boss oversaw their departure, clapping Jace on the shoulder once more. You got guts, kid, he said. You too, beast lady, he added, nodding grudgingly at Kaera, who just growled faintly in response. Take your crate and get out of here. If you ever need another job, we'll find our own way, Jace cut in politely, wanting to distance himself from any further dealings with these questionable figures. Without further ceremony, they boarded the Corvette. The interior had been cleaned up slightly, though scorch marks and exposed wiring remained in places. Jace settled into the pilot's seat, glancing at Kaera in the co-pilot's chair. The bandages on her shoulder and side were freshly changed, and her posture was stronger than before. Ready? He asked gently. She nodded, a small spark of excitement in her eyes. Ready. With a hiss, the Corvette lifted off the station's deck, passing through the docking port into open space. Once clear, Jace engaged the main engines, and the vessel soared away from the ragtag outpost. Kaera watched the star-speckled void pass by, a flicker of awe on her face. We have to decide where to go, Jace said, scanning the nav charts. We can't just wander. Kaera's ears twitched. We find new place, safe place. But also, we have data. We can show Galaxy truth. Jace exhaled. Exposing Project Feral might draw enemies, but maybe we can do it carefully, through legitimate channels. If we can reach a major colony with a fair judiciary system, or a big news net, we might blow this wide open. Her gaze hardened. They must pay. People who made us, who left me for dead. No more victims. He nodded, placing a comforting hand on hers. I agree. Let's see if we can find a trustworthy contact in the near systems. I used to know a reporter on Aldrion Port, someone who might help. Kaera glanced at the battered star map. How far? 2 jumps, if the hyperdrive holds, Jace said, frowning at the readouts. We'll need to check the drive's alignment. The station's crew replaced some parts, but I'm not sure they did it right. Rising from the seat, he motioned for Kaera to follow. They made their way to the engine compartment, where the hyperdrive couplings hummed softly. Jace ran a diagnostic, adjusting calibrations. Kaera looked on, occasionally asking questions about the machinery. You're curious? He asked, smiling faintly. Yes, she replied, her expression earnest. I only knew cages.labs. Shunts. Now I see machines travel between stars. It is strange, wondrous. Jace's heart twanged with sympathy, recalling the scope of her confinement. I'll teach you, he promised. All of it, if you want. Her lips curved in a gentle, almost shy smile. I do. They worked side by side, forging a small island of domestic cooperation amid the sea of cosmic dangers. Eventually, the hyperdrive diagnostic showed stable readings. Jace wiped sweat from his brow, relief flooding him. We can make the jump. Returning to the cockpit, they strapped in. Jace entered coordinates for the first jump, a route leading them toward Aldrion Port, a mid-tier hub known for trade and the occasional piece of investigative journalism. Kaera watched as the stars elongated, the Corvette slipping into the shimmering corridor of FTL travel. She leaned back, taking a shaky breath. Never did this before. Jace smiled, resting a hand on hers. Feels like we're bending reality, doesn't it? She nodded, eyes shining with a childlike wonder. In that moment, Jace felt a surge of emotion, a protectiveness and affection deeper than anything he had known. Despite her feral origins, or perhaps because of them, Kaera approached the universe with raw earnestness. He felt honored to be her guide, her partner in this uncertain odyssey. The swirling lights of faster-than-light travel enveloped them, carrying them toward whatever awaited in the next star system. They emerged from the jump near a pale star, a scattering of planetary bodies in the distance. The Corvette's systems hummed, though the hull plating rattled ominously. Jace carefully adjusted the throttle, scanning for signs of trouble. All quiet, he said, exhaling in relief. Let's see if we can pick up any transmissions. Kaera perked up, tail flicking. We watch for enemies, he nodded, tapping into local comm frequencies. A few commercial signals drifted in, alongside some static-laced chatter from small freighters. No mention of drones or Project Feral. Perhaps they were safe, for the moment. As they cruised deeper into the system, a small outpost appeared on the sensors, a fueling station, orbiting a barren rock. Jace considered stopping for more stable repairs, but their funds were nearly depleted. He bit his lip, glancing at Kaera. We should keep going, he said. We still have enough fuel to reach Aldrion. Kaera frowned, sensing his unease. No money. Very little, he admitted. She flexed her claws, mind churning. I could fight for credits or do a job. Is that how things work? Jace's stomach twisted. The notion of using her as muscle felt exploitative, even if she offered. He shook his head. We'll not manage, he said softly. Let's stay focused on our main goal, exposing Project Feral. She studied him, then nodded, a stubborn pride burning in her gaze. Together, they pressed on, initiating the second jump. The Corvette lurched uncomfortably, but the hyperdrive engaged, carrying them into the swirling corridor of lights once more. Moments later, they emerged in the outskirts of the Aldrion system. Traffic here was denser, comm signals more numerous. Freighters, passenger liners, and patrol craft crisscrossed the void. Far ahead glowed the swirling orb of Aldrion Port, a terraformed world dotted with shining cityscapes. A sense of hope ignited in Jace's chest. Perhaps this was the place where they could finally reveal the horrors of Project Feral, secure Kaera's freedom, and carve out some semblance of a normal life. But as they approached, a bright flash of energy lit up the cockpit. Warning klaxons blared. Jace gasped, checking the sensors. A ship had dropped out of FTL behind them. Weapons hot, another pursuit craft, bearing the distinct insignia of a covert ops unit. Damn it, he hissed. They found us. Kaera's eyes narrowed, and she hissed in anger. They want to erase me again. The comm system crackled to life, a stern voice declaring, "Unidentified corvette. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Noncompliance will result in immediate termination." Jace's mind raced. Aldrion Port was close enough that a local patrol might intervene if they broadcast for help. But could they hold out that long against this advanced strike vessel? The corvette was in no shape for another pitched battle. "We fight or run?" Kaera asked, tension radiating from her. Jace's gaze flicked to Aldrion's distant silhouette. "We run," he decided firmly, engaging the corvette's battered engines at full burn. "We get within range of the planet's security net. Hope they won't let these black ops kill us openly." A volley of laser fire strafed the corvette's shields, which flickered dangerously. Kaera bared her teeth, tapping the console for the meager weapons they had. She fired back, a burst of energy blasts that forced the pursuer to break formation. "Hold on," Jace warned, pushing the engines to their limit. The corvette rattled violently, alarms shrieking. Another barrage struck, jolting them sideways. Hull integrity dipped again, shields at 20%. Kaera read, a growl in her voice. Jace diverted power from the life support to the shields, hoping to buy a few more minutes. The corvette soared toward Aldrion, racing past civilian craft that veered away in confusion. The comm channels erupted with frantic chatter, ships demanding identification, others cursing their reckless flight path. The Black Ops vessel closed in again, launching a torpedo that streaked across the vacuum, a glowing harbinger of destruction. Jace yanked the controls, skirting behind a passing freighter. The torpedo locked onto the corvette's heat signature, swerving in pursuit. Kaera hammered the console's meager ECM suite, hoping to scramble its guidance. By some miracle, the torpedo wavered, losing lock amid the chaotic energy signatures near Aldrion. It careened off course, exploding harmlessly in the void. The Black Ops ship soared closer, unleashing another barrage that rocked the corvette. Proximity to Aldrion's security grid is 5,000 kilometers. Jace reported through gritted teeth. "They'll detect the fight soon." Kaera nodded, reloading the corvette's weapon capacitor. She fired another volley, surprising the pursuer. One lucky shot struck a vital system, causing a cascade of sparks along the Black Ops ship's flank. It drifted momentarily, then resumed chase. Finally, an authoritative voice rang out across the local channels, hostile engagement within Aldrion's approach corridor. All ships powered down immediately. Security craft en route. The Black Ops ship hesitated, forced to weigh the consequences of engaging near a major colony. Another hail crackled through the corvette's comm. "Corvette, identify yourself." Jace did so with a ragged breath. "This is TAS 76 Corvette Stalwart Survivor." He lied quickly, giving a fabricated registry. "We're under attack. Need immediate safe harbor." A new wave of laser fire hammered them, despite Aldrion's warning. Their pursuer was determined to finish the job. Kaera let out a furious snarl. Jace wrestled with the controls, the corvette spinning out of alignment. Then, with a flash, Aldrion's security patrol ships dropped out of their staging orbit. Sleek and well-armed, they wasted no time in targeting the Black Ops vessel. A barrage of intercept missiles soared, forcing the pursuer to break off. Kaera watched the display, eyes gleaming with savage satisfaction. "Let's land," Jace gasped, guiding the corvette into Aldrion's orbit. The battered vessel wove through the colony's traffic lanes, trailing smoke behind them. The Black Ops ship faced off against Aldrion's security forces in a tense standoff. The corvette shuddered, alarms bleeding non-stop. Jace eyed the nearest docking platform, a sprawling complex that handled cargo vessels. "Hang on tight," he muttered, bringing the Corvette in for a landing. The landing gear groaned under the stress, but eventually, with a jarring impact, they touched down. Silence settled in the cockpit, broken only by the hiss of steam from ruptured pipes. Jace let out a shaky laugh, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "We made it," he whispered, turning to Kaera. She was breathing heavily, eyes bright with relief and lingering fury. "Yes, we made it," she echoed. Aldrion Port's bustling docking platform contrasted sharply with the grimy fringe station they had visited before. Here, uniformed officers and automated cargo drones patrolled the decks, ensuring order amid the chaos of interstellar commerce. As Jace and Kaera descended the Corvette's ramp, they were greeted by a squad of security personnel, weapons holstered but at the ready. "Identify yourselves," the squad leader demanded, eyeing Kaera with guarded curiosity. Jace raised his hands calmly. "Jace Renn, and this is Kaera. We're traveling under duress. We were attacked in transit." The squad leader consulted a handheld scanner, frowning at the Corvette's battered hull. "We got your distress signal. The local authorities are investigating. For now, you'll have to stay planetside while we confirm your story." Kaera growled softly, but Jace placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "That's fine," he said. "We just want safe harbor." With a curt nod, the squad leader signaled them to follow. They were led through the port's security checkpoint, scanning their IDs, or in Kaera's case, a perplexed note that she lacked formal credentials. Jace recalled the data drive, hidden safely on his person, evidence of Project Feral that he intended to share with a journalist contact. Once through security, they emerged into Aldrion's grand concourse, a sprawling network of walkways, towering glass walls, and neon holograms advertising shops, lodging, and entertainment. Citizens of various species mingled, the air alive with chatter. Kaera stared, wide-eyed at the spectacle. "So many people," she murmured, her voice laced with wonder. Jace gently guided her, mindful that her feral features and bandaged wounds might draw stares. He checked a public directory for a suitable place to stay. Funds were still tight, but they had enough to rent a modest room in one of the lower-tier inns near the concourse. Within an hour, they had settled in a small but clean room with a window overlooking the city's gleaming spires. Kaera perched on the edge of the bed, glancing uncertainly at the accommodations. "Soft," she noted, pressing a hand to the mattress. Jace gave a weary smile. "Better than sleeping in a toxic jungle or a battered cockpit." She nodded, expression distant. "This all is new to me. A part of me expects to fight, to run." He sat beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We'll do whatever we must, but maybe, just maybe, we can find a life here at least long enough to clear our names, expose Project Feral, and make sure no one's hunting you anymore." Her eyes flickered with emotion. "You stay with me." His heart twisted at the vulnerability in her voice. "Always," he said, letting the weight of that promise resonate between them. They spent the next day gathering information. Jace ventured into the city, Kaera at his side, weaving through the crowds. He led her to a small diner where a friend of his contact, a waitress named Sarah, worked. Sarah recognized Jace, though barely, given his haggard appearance and Kaera's striking presence. "Rough times?" Sarah asked, pouring 2 cups of steaming caf. "You have no idea," Jace replied, sipping the drink gratefully. "I need to reach Mark Havelock. Heard he was working as an independent reporter here." Sarah pursed her lips. "He's a friend, but also a trouble magnet. You sure you want to drag him into your problems?" Jace exchanged a glance with Kaera. "We need him to get the word out, sensitive information. about an illegal military project. People are dying. They tried to kill us. Sarah eyed Kaera's feline features, the stripes on her arms, the pointed ears. I see, she said softly, understanding dawning. He's usually at the Press Guild building on 4th Spire. I can set up a meeting, but Jace, she hesitated, lowering her voice. Be careful. Corporations run this planet, and they don't like disruptive stories. Jace nodded. Thanks, Sarah. We won't drag you into this more than we must. Kaera devoured her meal with undisguised hunger, ignoring the curious stares of other patrons. Jace quietly paid and thanked Sarah, then led Kaera back into the bustling streets. That woman was kind, Kaera observed. You trust her, he shrugged. As much as I trust anyone here, but we have few choices. 4th Spire rose high above the city, an architectural marvel of glass and steel. Gleaming walkways crisscrossed, dotted with neon billboards that flickered advertisements. The Press Guild building sat on a mid-level platform, an unassuming tower overshadowed by corporate offices. Jace felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach as they approached. If Mark Havelock wouldn't help them, or if they were betrayed, the entire plan could collapse. Kaera sensed his unease, resting a hand on his arm. We face this, she said. Together. He offered a small smile. Right. Inside, the lobby exuded a quiet buzz of activity. Holographic displays showcased recent headlines, while reporters and staff hurried about. A bored-looking receptionist raised an eyebrow at Kaera, but said nothing. Jace asked for Mark, and to his relief, the receptionist directed them to a cramped office on the 10th floor. They found Mark hunched over a desk cluttered with data pads and scribbled notes. A wiry man with sharp features. Mark looked up in surprise as Jace knocked. Jace Renn, he said incredulously, pushing aside the clutter. It's been years. And whose? His gaze fell on Kaera, curiosity and wariness flickering in his eyes. Jace stepped forward, gripping Mark's hand. Good to see you, Mark. This is Kaera. Mark nodded politely, though his gaze lingered on her feline attributes. Pleasure, he said uncertainly. Then he gestured for them to sit. What brings you to Aldrion? And in such dramatic fashion. Jace drew a breath. We need your help. We have evidence data logs from a Black Ops program called Project Feral. They've been hunting us to keep it silent. Kaera is, well, a survivor of that program. Mark's eyes widened, adrenaline sparking. Project Feral. That's a name I haven't heard in a while. Rumors, mostly, untraceable. Jace produced the data drive, placing it on the desk. This might change that. We risked our lives to get it. Mark tentatively inserted the drive into his console. Lines of text scrolled across the screen, revealing horrifying details of genetic splicing, human rights abuses, covert operations. He blanched. My gods. Jace, he whispered. This is bigger than anything I've ever published. Kaera leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with a mix of anger and hope. Will you show the galaxy? Mark hesitated, struggling to absorb the magnitude of the revelations. If this is authentic, he said slowly, and it certainly looks that way, this could trigger a galaxy-wide scandal. But do you realize the danger? The corporations, the governments, they might shut this down. Journalists have been disappeared for less. Jace placed a hand on Kaera's. We know it's risky, but we can't hide forever. People need to know. We can't let them keep doing this to innocent beings. Mark rubbed his temples, glancing nervously at the door. I'll need time to verify this data, to cross-reference it with any existing records. But if I run the story, we'll need immediate protection, maybe safe passage off Aldrion once it goes live. The powers behind Project Feral won't sit idly by. Kaera's jaw tightened. We fight if needed. Mark nodded, though he still looked uneasy. Give me 48 hours. I'll contact a few discreet sources. We'll see about distributing this across multiple news nets, simultaneously harder to suppress that way. Jace felt relief wash over him, though it was tinged with apprehension. We'll lay low. Contact us when you're ready. They left Mark's office, tension thrumming in the air. Aldrion's bright cityscape greeted them again, its crowds oblivious to the secrets swirling behind the scenes. Kaera slipped her hand into Jace's. He squeezed back, grateful for her presence. 2 days, she murmured. Then the truth. Yeah, he said, scanning the bustling crowd. Let's just hope we survive that long. The next 48 hours proved a nerve-wracking wait. Jace and Kaera holed up in their modest lodging, venturing out only for food and to check for signs of pursuit. Aldrion's official channels reported the destruction of a covert vessel in the planet's approach corridor, which spurred speculation, but no official explanation. Kaera paced their small room restlessly, occasionally peering through the window at the city lights. What if Mark is taken? She asked, voice taut. Jace attempted reassurance he barely felt. We have to trust him. We'll know soon enough. On the second evening, Mark contacted them with an encoded message, data verified. Upload to begin at midnight. Danger imminent. Be ready to leave. He included coordinates for an old landing pad near the city's lower districts, far from the prying eyes of corporate security. Jace's heart pounded as he read the note. He's doing it. We need to hurry. Kaera secured what few possessions they had. Without a word, they set out, navigating Aldrion's neon-lit streets. Even at night, the city bustled with activity. Hover vehicles zipping through sky lanes, pedestrians crowding walkways. Jace felt an ever-present sense of being watched, though he couldn't pinpoint any pursuers. Eventually, they reached the coordinates, a neglected pad atop a run-down complex of warehouses. Mark stood beside a small shuttle, scanning the surroundings nervously. Relief flickered across his face when he spotted them. You weren't followed, he asked, ushering them aboard. Not that we saw, Jace replied, glancing over his shoulder. What's the status of the story? Mark closed the hatch. I triggered the data upload to multiple net outlets. By dawn, half the quadrant will see the evidence. That's if the sensors can't shut it down. It's unstoppable now. Kaera let out a low breath, a mixture of apprehension and grim satisfaction. Then they come for us. Mark nodded, powering up the shuttle's engines. I've got a lead on a safe house. We'll lie low until the story breaks in full. After that, the scandal might be too big for them to vanish us quietly. That's the hope. Anyway, he lifted off, guiding the shuttle through Aldrion's labyrinthine skyline. Jace and Kaera strapped in, the tension in the cabin palpable. Jace glanced out the window at the city's glittering lights, uncertain whether to feel relief or dread. Suddenly, alarms blared. Mark cursed, adjusting the controls. We're locked onto by an interceptor. Must be planetary security aligned with Project Feral's sponsors. An incoming hail crackled over the comm shuttle. Land immediately. You are under investigation for illegal distribution of classified materials. Failure to comply will result in lethal force. Jace's stomach sank. He looked at Kaera. They're not even pretending. Mark's face was grim. They must have traced the data leak back to me. Hang on! He veered the shuttle in a sharp turn, diving between towering skyscrapers. Green beams of light cut through the night, illuminating the shuttle's hull. Aldrion's corporate security was formidable, and they would stop at nothing to contain this crisis. Kaera braced herself, tail lashing. We fight or run. Mark yanked the controls. We can't outgun them in this tiny shuttle. Our best bet is to reach your Corvette at the docking platform. Then get off-world. Jace nodded, heart pounding. Let's do it. They wove through the city, dodging traffic and pulse beams from the pursuing interceptors. A few near misses left scorch marks on the shuttle's hull. Mark grit his teeth, pushing the engines harder than they were meant to go. "Coordinates locked on your docking pad," he shouted. "If we survive this, you owe me a drink." Jace managed a breathless laugh. "Deal!" More alarm klaxons warned of missile lock. The shuttle careened around a spire, the missile slamming into the structure behind them in a burst of debris. Aldrion's citizens scattered, screaming in fear. The city's automated defense system began activating, further complicating the chase. Finally, the docking platform came into view, the Corvette still resting there with minimal security around it. Jace's heart soared with hope. "There!" he shouted. Mark brought the shuttle in hard, landing with a jolt that nearly threw them from their seats. "Go, go, go!" he yelled, powering down. They dashed out onto the platform, the night air thick with smoke from the aerial attacks. Alarms and sirens echoed across the city skyline. Jace sprinted up the Corvette's ramp, quickly initiating the pre-flight sequence. Kaera bounded after him, while Mark covered the rear with a small sidearm. A crackle of gunfire and the hiss of energy beams erupted behind them. Security forces had arrived on foot, cornering them on the platform. Kaera whirled, unleashing a fierce snarl as she returned fire with the Corvette's docking turret. Mark dived for cover, pinned behind a cargo crate. Jace, inside the cockpit, frantically engaged the engines. The battered Corvette trembled, hull plating rattling ominously. Outside, Kaera leaped aboard, extending a clawed hand to Mark. He seized it, hauling himself up the ramp. Pulse blasts seared the air around them. The ramp closed with a heavy clang. Kaera sprinted to the cockpit, panting. "We're in!" Mark stumbled after her, wide-eyed. "We got to get off this rock, now!" Jace nodded, sweat trickling down his brow. The Corvette lifted off amid a barrage of ground fire. He angled the thrusters skyward, pushing the engines to their absolute limit. Shots peppered the Corvette's shields, draining them steadily. "We can't take much more," Mark yelled, clinging to a bulkhead. The Corvette soared higher, weaving between neon towers. Aldrion's defense grid lit up the sky, anti-air turrets spitting beams of ionized energy. One blast caught the Corvette's starboard side, causing a power surge that nearly knocked out life support. Jace frantically rerouted power to the engines, ignoring the shriek of system overload alarms. Kaera strapped into the co-pilot's seat, snarling at the readouts. Shields failing. With a final burst of speed, the Corvette broke through Aldrion's upper atmosphere. The vacuum of space loomed, but the fight was far from over. Corporate security frigates patrolled orbit, scanning for them. Jace clenched his teeth. Mark pointed at a gap in the patrol pattern. "There! If we slip through that lane, we might jump." Jace angled the Corvette, heart hammering. The frigates detected them, adjusting course. Laser batteries flared. The Corvette shook under the barrage, alarms wailing. Kaera let out a furious roar, as though sheer anger could shield them. Then, in a miraculous gap, the Corvette burst free, escaping the frigate's effective range. "Initiating jump!" Jace shouted, slamming the hyperdrive controls. A swirl of stars enveloped them as they vanished into FTL, leaving Aldrion's raging chaos behind. The Corvette emerged from hyperspace in a quiet region of unoccupied space, stars glittering against the darkness. The transition was rough, sending sparks flying from the console as overloaded systems tried to reset. Jace coughed, waving away smoke. Mark slumped in a corner, legs shaking with adrenaline. Kaera huffed, running a hand through her hair. "We live," she said, surprise coloring her tone. Jace nodded, a shaky laugh escaping him. Barely. Mark swallowed, composing himself. The data is out there now. I triggered the simultaneous upload. The galaxy knows about Project Feral. With any luck, public opinion will force the powers that be to back off for fear of a widespread scandal. Kaera looked unconvinced. They still chase. Some do not care about scandal, only power. Jace squeezed her shoulder. Maybe, but they can't kill this story anymore. People will ask questions. Mark rubbed his eyes, exhaustion evident. I'm sure by now. Half the major networks have the story. We'll see who tries to spin it or bury it. I just hope it saves lives, maybe even helps other survivors. Kaera's gaze softened. Yes, she whispered. Jace took the pilot's seat, exhaling. We need a place to recover, to decide our next move. The Corvette's in bad shape. Fuel's low. Mark frowned. I have a contact near the Arcadia system small, independent outpost that owes me a favor. We can refuel, do some quick repairs, then figure out where to go from there. Kaera and Jace exchanged glances. The immediate crisis was over, but the future remained uncertain. Yet they had exposed the truth, and in doing so, perhaps forged a path to something better. Arcadia, Jace repeated, entering coordinates. Let's go. A short jump later, the Corvette landed softly on a remote outpost. Little more than a lonely docking platform and a handful of prefab structures under a rocky overhang. Mark guided them through introductions with a gruff caretaker who provided them with fresh supplies in exchange for small favors, technical repairs, manual labor. Days passed in relative quiet. Kaera's wounds healed steadily, the rest easing her mind as well as her body. Jace and Mark ventured to patch up the Corvette, replacing fried circuits and re-welding damaged plating. Hollow screens at the outpost buzzed with news about Project Feral. Allegations, denials, public outcry. A public inquiry was launched. Mark said one evening, scanning the news feeds. At least some governments seem interested in investigating. Jace let out a breath of relief. That means they can't pretend it never happened. Kaera watched from a distance, arms folded. And me? She asked softly. Will they still chase me? Jace stood, moving to her side. He remembered the final lines of the newsfeed rumors about bounties placed on feral subjects, declared dangerous anomalies. There might still be those who want to silence you, he admitted. But the more people learn, the harder it'll be for them to operate in the shadows. She met his gaze, searching his face. We find place to belong. He lifted a hand, brushing a stray lock of hair from her eyes. We will, he promised gently. We'll keep moving if we must, but we'll be together, and we'll find a home, whether it's on some frontier colony or among those who'd protect you. A faint smile touched her lips, and she rested her forehead against his. My mate, she whispered. He closed his eyes, letting the warmth of her presence chase away lingering fears. Mark watched from the sidelines, a bemused smile on his face. You two deserve some peace, he remarked. I'll keep digging into the corporate ties. Maybe help some other survivors step forward. But you, he gestured at them, you've done enough. Save yourselves now. Jace nodded, gratitude welling in his chest. Thank you. Mark, we owe you. The older man shook his head. Just stay alive. That'll be payment enough. Weeks turned into months as Jace and Kaera ventured across remote sectors, avoiding the more prominent trade routes where they might be recognized. They visited scattered frontier stations, hidden enclaves, and backwater colonies, seeking a place where Kaera's origins would not provoke fear or exploitation. Though they still encountered the occasional bounty hunter or corporate operative. The threat had lessened considerably since Project Feral's exposure. Public sentiment turned against those who had perpetrated such atrocities, and official channels faced immense scrutiny. Kaera's existence, while still an oddity, now had the shield of public opinion, at least in some corners of the galaxy. In that time, Jace and Kaera solidified their bond in countless subtle ways. They made the Corvette their home, patching it with salvaged materials, personalizing it with small comforts. Kaera learned more words, refining her speech, while Jace taught her about star navigation, hyperspace theory, and the myriad cultures they encountered. Their companionship evolved into a gentle intimacy. They found solace in each other's presence, Kaera's fierce devotion, and Jace's patient understanding, weaving a tapestry of trust. On some nights, beneath the Corvette's flickering cabin lights, they would hold each other, exchanging whispered hopes and fears, forging a unity born of shared struggle. At last, they happened upon a tranquil moon called Solora, orbiting a gas giant in a remote corner of space. Solora boasted mild weather, lush fields, and a fledgling settlement of settlers who valued independence above all else. Despite Kaera's beastly attributes, the settlers, once they recognized the kindness in her eyes and the sincerity in Jace's voice, welcomed them. "Hard workers are always needed," said the settlement's leader, a stoic woman named Marisol. "We don't ask too many questions here, so long as you don't bring trouble." Jace and Kaera exchanged hopeful smiles. Trouble seemed distant, for once. They spent days helping the colony with manual tasks, constructing new dwellings, repairing outdated machinery, tending communal gardens. Kaera's enhanced strength proved a boon, and her instincts helped ward off occasional predators in the moon's wilderness. Jace's technical expertise revitalized the settlement's power grid. In return, the settlers offered them a humble abode, a small cottage overlooking rolling hills of swaying golden grass. At night, the sky twinkled with countless stars, untainted by city lights. Peace settled around them like a comforting cloak. One evening, as they watched the gas giant's shimmering bands eclipse the setting sun, Kaera leaned against Jace. "We are safe here," she murmured, though a trace of uncertainty lingered in her tone. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, gently stroking her hair. "As safe as we can be," he said, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "If the galaxy leaves us alone, we'll stay as long as we can." She let out a low purr of contentment, a habit she had never quite lost. "With you," she breathed. He kissed her forehead. "Always." Months passed in tranquil routine. The threat of drones and covert hunters became a distant memory, overshadowed by the rhythms of daily life on Solora. Kaera found fulfillment in aiding the colony's defense, her heightened senses invaluable for patrolling the outskirts. Jace contributed to the settlement's growth by introducing basic tech upgrades and teaching the younger colonists about starship maintenance. Word of Project Feral's collapse spread across the galaxy. Mark's expos triggered further investigations, leading to prosecutions and reforms. Secret experiments were halted, and many of the program's masterminds faced tribunals. Although pockets of corruption lingered, the largest threat to Kaera's existence waned under the relentless spotlight of public condemnation. One lazy afternoon, Jace and Kaera walked through the fields outside their cottage. The grass whispered in the breeze, and a pair of flying creatures soared overhead. Kaera paused, squinting at them, her tail flicking with quiet wonder. Jace smiled, admiring her. "Something on your mind?" She turned, her eyes reflecting a profound peace he had rarely seen. "I was thinking, before, I knew only cages and hunts. Now I know sunshine, friends, dew. Sometimes I cannot believe it is real." He reached out, clasping her hands in his. "It's real," he said softly. "We made it, and we'll keep making it, every day." Kaera nodded, stepping closer. Her feral features softened as she leaned against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "I belong here," she whispered. "With you." Warmth filled Jace's chest, a tear threatening to escape. "And I belong with you," he replied, gently stroking her striped arms, his voice trembling with quiet joy. They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in the gentle hush of the Soloran breeze. Beyond the horizon, the settlement carried on in its humble tasks, unaware of the harrowing journeys that had brought these two together. But for Jace Renn and Kaera, once a discarded experiment, once a hunted fugitive, this peaceful world was more than a refuge. It was proof that even in a galaxy haunted by shadows, hope, love, and freedom could prevail. And so their story found its rest beneath endless stars, woven together by survival and devotion, ending not in tragedy, but in a promise of life well beyond the cages of their past.